First, we're going to put on a tight-fitting camisole top and mark the underbust and the waist. So that's the underbust and that's the waist. If you have a tight-fitting cami dress, then that can work as well. So we're going to get a sheet of paper and we're going to draw a straight line. This will be our center front line. Place the top along the straight line and trace along the neckline and armhole area until you get to the underbust pin. At the pin, just draw a straight line from the center front. I wanted the front of the dress to be a little straighter, so I adjusted the neckline a bit. Then I added a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all around. But then I measured my underbust and divided by 4 and realized that this line here was a bit too big, so I took it in some and redid the seam allowance. The back of the top of the dress is the same as the front, but without the neckline. So just copy from the armhole point downwards, and this is how it should look. Now if you use a dress to trace from, you can skip all of this. I drew a line about 20 inches long and placed the top alongside that line again. This is again the center front. I marked where the bust and the waist was on the paper, and then I drew a straight line from the center front and used the pattern from the top of the dress for the measurement. This is going to be the bottom part of the dress that attaches to the top part. After we have marked the underbust measurement on the line, then we draw a straight line that represents the waist, where we marked on the paper. So your measurement here should be a 1/4 of your waist. The hips are usually 7 inches down from the waist, so I went down 7 inches on the center front line from the waist and drew a line that is a 1/4 of my hip measurement. I made the length of the dress be 20 inches because I planned to trim it anyways when it was done. Please remember that if you have a butt, to make the back about 1/2 of an inch to 1 inch longer than the front. I connected the underbust to the waist to the hips and then did an A-line curve from the hips to the bottom of the dress. The side seam shouldn't have any points or corners, so make sure you curve it, and then you can add seam allowance. All these pattern pieces will be cut on the fold. So that's just one piece for the front and the back there at the bottom, the skirt bit. Then we have the front of the top and the back of the top. Okay, so this is a fold here. So we're gonna put this here. Now this is what you don't do. Do not get this and think that because this is on a fold here, you can do like that. No, you can. You can. The proper way to do it is make everything look the same way. You never know how a nap is upside down. Now cut all of the patterns in black, which is the underlayer. I used cotton jersey for this. Because everybody's always asking me what fabric I use. So I cut the top, front and back on the fold, and I cut 2 skirt pieces on the fold, which will be the front and the back. And then I cut the mesh bit 1 inch longer than the lining. This mesh is a stretchy mesh. Okay, I don't know what else it's called. It's just stretchy mesh. Now put the front top of your fabric away from the fold so that there's excess fabric at both sides of the pattern. The more fabric, the more ruffle puffiness on the bust area. I suggest leaving about 4 inches away from the fold in the middle and then 3 inches on the outer bit. I didn't leave enough on mine and it didn't come out very roughly. I also added 1/2 of an inch at the bottom by the middle for extra boofiness right here. And then I just, okay. Okay, so I'm too lazy to do, this is what we're using of course, but I'm too lazy to do binding made from this. So, and I really don't like this color. I mean, it's a gray blue, but I don't like blue. So, I was saying if I use this and I cover it like that, the black is too harsh. So I'm gonna try and dye it. We have these, and I'm gonna try and dye it and see how it looks. And see how it comes out. Alrighty, so this didn't come out as planned. I used this Majig paint here and I chucked it inside of an empty Coke bottle. I added some water and burnt a hole in the top of the Coke cap to squirt the dye through. In my perfect world, it would have beautifully splashed on the fabric and created an amazing tie-dye effect. Instead, it did this. It wouldn't even soak into the fabric. I'll have to live with it, I guess. I mean, it's more grungy than anything. It's like if I was standing in New York City and a cab splashed me with dirty water. Anyways, what is done is done. With right sides facing, I placed the back of the skirt over the front of the skirt. I pinned the side seams, and then I did the same for the black lining, or the underlayer of the fabric. This is it sewn. With the right sides up on both bottom pieces, I placed the mesh layer over the underlayer, and I pinned it at the top. Here, we're going to zoom there, basting stitch there. Then we're going to do a basting stitch here, and over here. And then we're going to do a basting stitch here. So now we're going to get our front piece that we basted. And you always leave the lines alone, so the line should always be hanging like this. So I did 1, 2, and 3. So this is our little front piece. And it looks wonky because it's curling up. So I'm just gonna pin the side seams together. They're right here at the top. Then I'm going to pull this basting stitch until the mesh curve matches up with the black underlayer curve. That wasn't much of a ruffle, was it? Okay. When that is done, we pin that in place and then pull the strings for the neckline until it matches up with the underlayer, and do the same for the other curve. So I actually forgot to do was put a basting stitch along the bottom here, so I went and did that. And then I pulled it to match the underlayer.
Charlie, come on, we're getting ready to say bye to everybody. Can they get a Charlie wink? Yes, yes they can.
What I'm using here is Stretchy Binding. I think they use this in lingerie. I don't know, but this is what we're going to use now. Okay guys, it came out really bad. So we're going to unpick this and we're going to do it over. I don't know if you can see how wonky it is. But we're going to do this over. So what I did was that I basted the bottom and the sides just so that I didn't have to worry about pinning. So I basted the mesh to the underlayer first, and then I reapplied the binding over the center neckline. And look how much better that looks. Don't worry about the extra stitching, that's going to be taken out later. Now with the right sides facing up, pin the left side of the top, only the left side, pin that together. I got my shirt from the beginning and measured how long the strap was, and I got my binding, and from one end of the binding I measured and placed a pin to that measurement. So say the measurement of the strap was 12 inches, I measured 12 inches on the binding, and then I started to pin the binding to the top of the right armhole curve from that 12-inch mark. At the machine, we sew the binding closed, and then we continue sewing the armhole curve. We also sew the left side seam. This is how it looks sewn. Now we bind the entire piece. So it's going to come all around the top of the back, past the side seam and up the armhole curve. Then we continue to stitch the binding the length of the strap, so you'll see the same 12 inches. When that is done, we're going to stitch the side seam closed. This is all we have left back, guys. What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? So I already did the side seam, but this is how it looks now. So what I'm gonna do, this part is a little stretched out, this back part here, and it's stretched out. Now this is a mistake of mine, but it's stretched out because I didn't stretch it while sewing it on. It's okay, Patch, relax. I didn't stretch it while sewing it on. So when you do it, stretch it while sewing it. But 1, 2, 3, we're gonna go 3 inches from the inside here, and we're gonna get this one, and we are going to pin it. Then we're gonna go 3 inches from this side here. This. With right side facing, place the bottom of the top piece over the top of the skirt and pin. We're going to match up the side seams, then the center fronts and the center backs, and sew. We're also going to do a top stitch to secure the straps at the back. After stitching all of that up, I got an 1/8 of an inch elastic that's an inch shorter than my underbust measurement, and I zigzagged it along the same underbust seam allowance, only on the seam allowance. So it's not on the seam, it's on the seam allowance. So I pinned that along the seam allowance there, and I just took it to the machine and I stitched it. By placing the elastic there, it just helps make your bust feel like it's actually being held up a bit. You don't have to do it. So now that that is done, I try on the dress and I cut it to my desired length. I made the under layer 2 inches shorter than the mesh layer, and I simply folded it under 1/2 of an inch and top stitched, using a wider stitch than normal. Not as wide as a basting stitch, but wider than a normal stitch. When I did the mesh layer, I did a lattice hem at the bottom. This is how it all looks. Now remove any visible basting stitch done on the top of the dress and you are donesies!
She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something about her features. You'll find her beauty goes much deeper once you get to meet her. You see her walking down the boulevard. She got the posture of a superstar. She looks so fly in those Gucci slides. Yeah, yeah, I wonder what she hides under her disguise. Yeah, 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 yeah. And all the girls around the world, they wanna be her. And all Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something about her features. You'll find her beauty goes much deeper once you get to meet her. She's a Mona Lisa.